I started thinking about George Floyd.
Appropriate.
I did a little bit of Googling, and there were a few people that had written about Renee Girard and George Floyd back in 2020. But that one of the interesting things about him. Okay, so one, I was thinking, why did that work so powerfully in the summer of 2020? So that we had riots and marches and fires. I mean, this sort of collective violence that was unleashed on the United States and around the world because of his death fit all of the things that Girard was describing about what happens when the mob kills the victim. One thing was, and this maybe will help, because not everybody knows the myths, but we all know what happened with Floyd. It's sort of split in the political thing as, oh no, he had put a gun to his pregnant girlfriend's head or something like that, and he was a drug user, and he was known to the police for he got piled with all of the crimes, all of the sins, all of the monstrosities. Right? The public didn't know that before he died, but it certainly learned that after. So he carried the scapegoat character of the monster. Ended up in like divinized in art, right? That they're murals and statues and movies, and it's like all he got divinized in the way that we divinize, which is images spread all around the world, everywhere. Yes. And then everybody was marching in his name. We live in a post-gospel moment where we can see the scapegoats as innocent, thanks to Christ, which is jumping ahead a bit, but one of the things that Girard says is very, very important to recognize. But on the other hand, I think Floyd did play the character of the old pre-Christian scapegoat too.
In the sense that he fed the son of America.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting.
Everything got set on fire. Yeah,
it's an economic mechanism. You have to invigorate the society via these sacrifices. I'm wondering what happened after George Floyd's death. I mean, Floyd had to reveal something invisible. Right. This is what they're doing as well, right? So it's like he reveals the invisible sins of the crowd, of the society, because no one's talking until suddenly someone dies, and then suddenly everybody's talking. What are they talking about? They're talking about the collective sins of the group that have been heaped on this one person. And the euphemism that everyone used was, of course, white supremacy, the specter of white supremacy that was lingering everywhere. But I think it was more than that too.
I think it was much more than that. I think that's so. This is part of why I think that's why we're not seeing riots now, even though people are very clear about things about like the damage that had been done with the vaccines, and we keep talking about how there will be riots, and they're not, right? And you could say, all right, so the Floyd riots, the BLM riots were engineered actors who set up marches and things like that and fed into it.
Brick-making companies.
Yeah, I saw bricks on the sidewalk today. No, I think they were just redoing somebody's driveway. That doesn't explain why it worked, right? There's always we have regular efforts to have parades and rallies and collect together, and we're all gonna. It doesn't always work. And summer 2020 and allegedly the height of the plague. How cool is that, right? It's like plague, COVID pandemic, giant scapegoat rallies the same summer.
In my current understanding of this, for him to have been scapegoated, he has to have revealed something to the crowd about the thing that they don't want to really acknowledge, which is their own particular sins or their own monstrosities.
One of the things that happened is that I didn't watch this video, but everybody else did, that people watched him die. Isn't that interesting? It's it's like, why Floyd from all of the other, how many, I would have to Google it or look it up right now. It's like, how many people have died in Chicago of gunshots and, accidents, and it's like we're going for a record year, thanks Mayor Lightfoot. She's not going to be mayor anymore because everybody got upset with, and that's not, the thing is that she's not being scapegoated, she's just being voted out, right? It's not just that he died, and it's not just that he died in custody with the police. I think it was as much that everybody saw it.
It was filmed.
How would you end up with a collective scapegoat in a context in which the entire world, it's like we're not just one city throwing rocks at a person who's wandered into the walls. It's the entire world watched it. So everybody who watched that video participated in his murder. And that's, I think, probably one of the things that triggered the whole mechanism, because it became a collective murder because everybody watched it. And then they were part of it. They were part of the mob who killed him.
This makes sense. Because if they'd been there physically, they would have had the choice to prevent the murder. But because they're looking at a recording, they're looking at the streamed version of the murder. They don't have the choice. This is why they're rioting.
Maybe. I mean, they had the choice not to watch, but everybody watched.
Yes, everybody watched. But it's not the same thing, because if you're watching some crime that's happening in front of you, you have a different set of choices, which is, I can step in physically to prevent this from happening. So this explains, it's a different kind of trauma. You're seeing something happening that you're physically powerless to affect.
Well, the thing about the collective murder in the sacrifice is the mob goes along with it. I think that the going along with it in this context is you watch that video. And you sort of allowed yourself to watch that murder, and then you become part of it. And that in Gerard's understanding, it's like once the mob has participated in this consensus of focusing on the victim, it creates a kind of unanimity of the crowd because you've all participated in this murder. I think that the sort of liturgy as participation is really critical here, that you're participating in this one event. That's why watching Mass on live stream didn't work. Although this did, right? Watching Floyd die did somehow collectively fuse everybody who watched it into a community.
But it was a pre-murder. It was a murder before the vortex, because people are rioting. People rioted the way everyone expects them to riot because of the COVID mandates and the destruction that the mandates had on civilization.
Right. They're not going to. I don't think they're going to.
They've already done it by protesting Floyd's death.
So it's
being flipped.
Yes, I think it's been flipped. There's something that's been flipped.
Yeah.
I think that the vaccination and being marked or unmarked, I mean, all of the pressure that followed. Think about what happened after the riots, right? That was what was strange about them. All these marches and everything in the summer of 2020, big collective activity, allegedly in the midst of this rapidly spreading. There were no vaccines at that point. I think it was all of those marches somehow that made the rest of it happen. But then everybody stayed inside and stayed locked down. It spiraled into the mimicry of the masks and the lockdowns and the wanting the vaccine. And it was the taking of the vaccine that made you participate in that somehow. Okay, so there's another piece. I think we're starting to get enough of the pieces that maybe my one moment understanding of Gerard is starting to play out linearly. Another piece of the riots and the marches and the what the crowd needs. That the mimetic rivalry creates likeness. It creates a lack of difference, right? So we'll go back to our salvific, satanic, scientific. The problem, Gerard theorizes in this, it's like, why do we spiral up into the violence at some point? It's because, in fact, the community is experiencing too much sameness. I mean, to a certain extent, that the rivalries have all focused on the same object, and so everybody's, like triggered to fight. This is right. I'm always thinking in terms of the Dr. Seuss story of the Sneetches with the stars on their tummies. You start off with the situation where only the star-bellied Sneetches have high status, and the not star-bellied Sneetches have low status. And then this guy comes along with a machine that can put stars on their tummies, and everybody has stars. At which point the star-bellied Sneetches want to get theirs taken off, so they get theirs taken off, and then it's more high status to have no, and then they switch back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And at the end, who knows? That's the hopeful version of social peace. But realizing that, I think what calmed everybody down is we're now differentiated into vaccinated and not. That's why we're not going to have riots now, because we've actually been redifferentiated.
We've made distinctions.
So what's weird, it's like there was all this pressure to all become the same, and some of us refused. Everything's calming down, and those of us who refused the pressure to all become the same are sitting there going, why aren't you guys upset? It's like, because there's nothing to be upset about now. And in a sense, there's no mimetic rivalry fueling anything in the way that there was in summer 2020. Now we've got Mel going boom shakalaka. The mechanisms that Gerard is describing do seem to be accurately observed, which is what matters for the understanding of human dynamics.
Well, this explains the language around whites versus people of color. Well, white is nothing. It's no distinction. It's monochromatic. And people are obsessed with pox because everybody wants to be of color, meaning they want distinction. They want color, meaning they want the spectrum split. They want white split up into the spectrum of, colors. So Floyd dies, everyone's rallying against white supremacy. But they're rallying against the homogenization of the Enlightenment culture. That makes perfect sense. It's because they want to be colored.
We're just going to sit here going, whoa, for the moment.
Because you don't have a tribe in white.
We don't. that's
don't have tribal
right.
distinctions in white. You're just all Aztecs.
Okay, one, we're all empire, which is bad. We have to be Christian, otherwise we end up with the spiraling violence. I think you're right that people were upset about not being able to be something, like anything. I mean, I'm actually, I was walking around the neighborhood today and saw what looked like a little elf. Her hair was beautifully blue, right? She's walking home with her dad from school, and I'm like, with like eyeliner that would rival yours, right? And I think she's like 12 or something. And you say yes, and so look at that's what it's like, the hair colors and the makeup and the clothes and stuff. Like, of course, people are. It's like what Marshall McLuhan, may he rest in peace, pointed out even in the 60s of what he called the international mufti. It was like,
oh yeah, this like. I wear everything from everywhere.
Everything from everywhere, and everybody wanted to be all colored and like. I'm a hippie. Come on, I may wear the same thing every day on these live streams, but that's because my autism, it helps me to get into the mood. That the desire to be in the color and the light and the rainbow. We've talked about that, and yes, that Floyd people wanted to be in the rainbow. They wanted to be in those parades and marching and. I still haven't put together why the COVID vaccines gave them the satisfaction of being in the rainbow. That's eluding me still.
Well, you get the distinction without having to leave the empire. This is the sprout of a thought right now. It's more of an intuition than anything. Because what has happened to us here is that we have this uncomfortable relationship with Australia as a thing. The founding murder of Australia isn't on home soil. So we have a very unstable relationship to the identity of being Australian. So we're very sensitive to what's happening in America. Whatever gets broadcast from America comes here. We're very sensitive to it because we don't have our own founding mythology keeping us cohesive yet, except if you're a war, because then we've got Christ. Pouring everybody into multiculti, it all starts to look the same because it's interchangeable. Like how you were saying before, people not being able to see the difference between this Aztec pyramid and the mass. Mm-hmm. Just pouring people in and then being told, oh, it's fine, we're multicultural, everything's okay. Actually, what that does is it creates this tension because everything's equivocated. So this is the vortex. It's like there is a rivalry because we're constantly being told in being multicultural that everybody's equal. Yes. It's the inversion of the language in saying we're multicultural, but there is no multi anything.
Right.
There's no multiplicity. Everything's equivocated, which means it's all the same thing. It's just repackaged, rebranded, however you want to particularly do the same thing. So people are being told this over and over and over and over again in Western multicultural environments. That would explain the vortex. They're becoming white by being put into multiculturalism. It actually takes away. I know this is going to sound so nuts. No, it makes
total sense. They don't want to be white. They want to be colored.
They don't want to be white. They want to be colored, which is healthy. But because of the category language that we're using, people don't know how to verbalize what they're actually saying. So they're going on white supremacy. What they're actually fighting against is being homogenized. That's the mimetic rivalry. Well, people wanted the distinction.
Yes. So Casey's saying the COVID vaccines gave them belonging to something, a group, and subsequently recognized people needed the differentiation within the internet. I mean, we were getting multicultural so that we were all white, but we were also getting homogenized on these giant social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and such. And people didn't actually want to be all on the same platform. They wanted to be differentiated into meaningful communities. Which the marching in the streets, I think the marching in the streets made you at least part of your city. You march physically, the BLM marches were interesting, you march physically through the streets of your own city.
So you're physically present.
Yes.
In the geography of your hometown and offline.
Right.
They needed to protest to get off the internet.
There
was a collective logging off.
Yep.
Yeah.